Alright, so this is a 2001 Kawasaki Prairie 400 4x4. That's a mouthful. I have not seen, and I've scoured the YouTubes, I have not seen a lot of videos on these bikes. I've been kind of figuring everything out by service manual and by forums and just by just tinkering. I bought this bike in the dark for $1,000, which I overpaid, if I'm being honest. Once I got into it, I found there were a lot of issues with it. The back end was completely disintegrated from the swingarm bearings back. There was no good bearings, no good seals in that. So fortunately, it's salvageable, but it's taken a lot of work. So start at the front, kind of work my way to the back. Let's talk through some of the issues I've had and what's going on, and probably do a little series on this bike. So the story starts with a Kawasaki Lakota that I bought for my daughter so she could ride with me. I've got a Can-Am. I love that bike. It's awesome. Highly recommend it. If you need one, get one. But anyway, she was riding on the back of that thing with me, and it was just, it kind of zaps the fun, you know. It's great to bond with your daughter and everything, but she's big enough that she needed her own bike. So we got the Lakota, and I got it all fixed up, bearings, carb kit, a few other things, some electronics, pretty much the entire ignition system, and then the wire harness caught fire. Apparently the previous owner on that bike had done some tinkering with it and had a short, so rebuilt the wiring harness, rode that bike for about a year, and it just got stuck everywhere. It was two-wheel drive, and you know, the Can-Am's four-wheel drive. She just couldn't keep up with me. I was dragging her most of the way. So I sold that bike for $1,200. Went and bought this one for, like I said, $1,000. Thinking, you know, I was $200 to the good. Actually, I'm better than that to the good because of what I paid for the Lakota, which is only a couple $100. Put a couple $100 in it and sold it for $1,200. So I probably made about $700 off of that bike. You can do the math. Anyway, so this bike, the plastics are off outside. Every screw is seized on it and stripped out. So spent a lot of time with an easy out. That was no fun, but buy that tool. If you don't have it and you're planning on taking on a project like this, absolutely have a good set of easy outs. And a good drill and a bunch of hammers. Anyway, so I took the plastic off, finally got it stripped down. You know, took the grill, lights, all that stuff off. One of the first things I noticed was it didn't start. So I went and got a battery and tried to start it. Nothing. Didn't do anything. So I diagnosed it, traced it back, found the starter was bad. The starter was $50. Went ahead and bought it, put it on. Basically, it sits right under the carb there. That was a pretty easy job. 2 bolts, and then the screw for the power. Or sorry, the nut for the power. So got that on, got the battery, cranked it up. It did crank. It felt like it held compression, everything. So I rebuilt the carburetor, got the kit, put that on there, and it fired right up. A couple of adjustments later, starts on the first push of the button. A lot of the plastics are very brittle, so one of the things that happened was the thumb lever here for the choke broke off. You know, and then the other thing that I noticed once I got it going was the dash. Now, this bike's a 2001. 2001, this had a digital display, you know, trip computer, clock, speedometer, all that stuff, backlit with LED. It's pretty awesome, and in 2001, this was a big deal. Unfortunately, they did use an LCD screen. This bike sat out in the sun a lot, and the LCD decayed. Doesn't really work anymore. You can barely see it. If I could get the screen, everything else in this works. Other than that, all the electronics seem to be okay. Even the cigarette lighter adapter works. The lights worked, although the bulbs, one side the high beam was burnt out, the other side the low beam was burnt out, so I'll replace those. Okay, so it started. I got it running, and it was loud as crap. Somebody gutted the muffler. I've already ordered one of those. The new replacement for this that actually fits it is about $270. I found one for $99. That's not direct fit. But what I'll do is I'll show you how to get it to work. And basically it's going to involve cutting these things off the old muffler. You'll cut a hole in there and then strap it. Pretty simple. So it was loud, but it started. Happy days. So I took it out. There was a lot of squeaking and chattering from the transmission. It's CVT, so you put it in gear and go. There's no shifting. And it does have high and low range as well as reverse. But notice there was a lot of squeaking and stuff. The bike had sat for at least 2 years outside. So, you know, some noises to be expected. So I went and I got a new belt. I could not get that cover off. You have to take the footboard off and you have to take the brake off just to get that stupid cover off. There's got to be a better way, but that's the only way that I figured out how to do it. So I got this. I already pulled the spring and cap and everything off of it, but there's some play in there, and that's what the chatter is. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this yet, whether I'm going to just replace it or try and rebuild it or adjust it or even run it like it is. That's to be determined. So I did get it. I rode it. The best part about riding this for the first time was I discovered something important. It had no brakes. So the front brake, for instance, this side here, the pad was worn through all the way to the point where the piston was through it, the brake piston, and it was rubbing the rotor. So my stopping power was a brake piston rubbing a rotor, and that was pretty much it. The other side was pretty much just, you know, metal on metal. So that's done. Changed the front diff fluid. It was filled with mud. I flushed it out and you know, refilled it. I'm going to run it for a little while, and then probably after you know, 3 or 4 hours, I'll go ahead and change it again. So the other thing that I noticed after I started it and rode it around a little bit, I checked the oil and it looked like chocolate milk, which is a telltale sign that there was water in it. So I thought maybe it's been sitting, maybe it's condensation, maybe something seeped in. Wasn't really sure. So I went ahead and changed the oil, put a new filter on it and everything, and it is milky once again. So very likely head gasket or maybe even a cracked jug. I'm going to tackle that after I get through with the rear end, which is my next topic. So when I rode it, I noticed there was a lot of slop and play in the rear end, and it made some unsettling noises. So what I found, the first thing I found was that the Swingarm bearings, this one, you know, has a swing arm, has bearings in there, and it's got 2 pins that stick in there. So this thing had been without swing arm bearings for quite some time because it was down to the races. The races were partially worn through, and the pins that hold them in were also worn flat. Somebody did not take care of this bike whatsoever. So I ordered the parts for that. Finally pulled everything apart. As soon as I got it up in the air and grabbed the wheel, I noticed the back bearings were gone too, in the axle. So ordered those, and then as I started pulling it apart, I noticed the bearings and seals in the diff were bad too. So for example, this is the differential here. It's not supposed to wobble like that. So those are on order as well. The swing arm I've already pulled apart, gotten the races out of, sanded it down, and painted it. I'm actually using a bed liner. I used it on another bike once, and it's really, really durable. doesn't chip, and I just like it. So the axle tube, again, same sort of deal. One side was down to just the race, so I finally got that out. And this is just doing a series of release cuts in the race, heating up the tube, slide hammer, beat the crap out of it, whatever means necessary. You know, put the relief cuts in it, heat the tube, and then it's just whooping from there. The other side had the bearing in it. I was able to just heat it and tap it out pretty easily. This one has been prepped. It'll get painted tomorrow. I'm using this Rust-Oleum truck bed coating. One thing I'll say, I've used a couple of these, and this one's a little bit more expensive, but well worth the money. So go ahead, spend the extra $2 or $3 on this stuff if you decide to use it. This stuff sticks to just about anything, dries quick, it's leveling, it's self-leveling. So even if you get a little drip, you know, it tends to settle itself out. So I've got the rear end out, I've got the races out, and I got this one cleaned up, ready to go back in. I've actually ordered the pins. I'm waiting on those, or that would already be back in there. Waiting on parts on the other thing, on the axle tube. I've got to get this stuff all loose. I've just shot it with penetrating oil, letting it sit. The rear brakes and the rear diff were completely full of mud, to the point where when I pulled the rear brake cover off, which is that little dome thing right there, when I popped that off, mud poured out of it and splashed. I mean, that's how much there was. There was a good half gallon of mud and water in there. So took it out, cleaned it up, and then started in on the brakes. This is the brake. It's a drum in the rear. The way it works, this thing here is supposed to pivot and actually separate the brake pads. This is all frozen, seized up. I've got to somehow get that working again. Not even sure. Probably just going to cut it off and order another one. Anyway, so that guy right there basically turns, separates the pads, and then the pads, you know, make contact with that guy there on the inside, and then that's all covered by that guy. And there's a bearing in there. That's what's stuck on there. So far I've got, you know, brakes. I did get a new belt for it. I'll do something with the clutch. Carb kit, starter, battery, pretty much all the bearings and seals in the rear end, and painting them up, making them look a little nicer. And then the head. I'll do the once I get the back end back together, I'm going to pull the head off. I'll do the valve adjustment, and probably I'll put a set of rings on it. Just if I may as well pull the jug off and, you know, clean everything up, hone it, and possibly punch it out a little bit and put a slightly bigger set of rings on it. So that's it. That's the project bike so far. A lot of work to be done, but I think it'll make a 14-year-old girl pretty happy. At least it better, or I'll kill her. The plan is, though, actually once I get this done, we'll ride it, make sure it's sound, have a little fun with it. I'll probably wind up selling this one too, and you know, buy another fixer-upper. Eventually I want to get her to an older model, maybe like a 650 Can-Am, but this is how I'm doing it, you know, a couple $100 at a time and a little bit of fun. So stand by. I'll be posting some other stuff up, you know, with this project bike. I'll definitely post up the valve adjustments because I couldn't find that anywhere, and the head gasket, and then I'll post up the assembly of the rear end once I get all the parts in.